Welcome everybody to Yoko Gaming. I'm Young Yoko, and today we're going to be doing the rifle tier list for Cuisine Royale for PS4. Now let's get started. Before we start, I should mention that all these images did come from the Wiki Fandom website. They have a really good plethora of data and information there, but I also use Cuisine Royale's website too, just for the stats. You have the damage, the armor piercing, and so forth, and so we're going to be using this as a basis and trying to stay as objective as possible here while we're doing this. So the first thing we need to get out of the way is what I'm calling the tank rifle. Now your tank rifle is your PZB-39 and your PTRS-41 respectively. This is your semi-auto and your single fire. Now why I put this in there is because it's the only guns I can tell that have your damage of 40 and 45 armor piercing with 40 stopping power. These are the only two guns in the class that have the stopping power. Which, if you're not familiar with what stopping power is, it's actually more of just like a stun. It has it down here too with your information. Now you can't run with these, but the ability to almost one-shot any target with the amazing bullet speed of being able to touch anybody way out there, they're just unmatched. So we're going to go ahead and put that out. Again, this is just the rifles, so we're going to be doing the semi-auto, the automatic, and the single fire. Now for your only S tier, I'm bringing in the AKM. This is my choice for your S tier. Now if we look at AKM, here we go. It's the only assault rifle in the class with the automatic that has your 10 damage, your 10 armor piercing. Now your bullet speed's a little bit less, and your fire rate's kind of average compared to some of the others like the SCAR-L and the M4. But where it loses in that, it makes up in the ability to put a rifle on. So you still have enough fire rate to hold your own up close, and then as you're traveling medium to far range with the scope and a reload speed of only 2.3 seconds, you're able to touch people way out in the distance more than you would say an M4 where the fire rate is just way too much. And so for this, I believe it's your best overall rifle as far as in its class, what it's supposed to do, and for that I believe it's in your S class. Moving on right after that, we're going to put the STG-44. Now where the STG-44 compared to the AKM, it has your 9-10 slat, which is your 10 damage and your 10 armor piercing. Notice nothing else has your stopping power. Your bullet speeds are relatively slower with 690 over a 720 for the AK, but where this makes up for it is it still keeps the 2.3 reload speed, which is 6 out of 17 guns have this, and you're jamming a 2 recoil. Now subjectively, because I've been using it, the STG doesn't have a lot of recoil, and it kind of mimics some in the Call of Duty franchise, so if you're comfortable with the STG there, you'll be comfortable with it here. These are probably the top 3 picks and the only 3 picks that I'd really put here for the S tier, as they really do the best in their class and their job. So moving on to the A tier, we're going to be talking about the M4A1. And I've got this little guy for the M4A1. Not everything's kosher. As we move on and keep doing this, they'll get a little bit better. But we have the M4A1. Now the reason we have the M4A1, it does drop down on your 8 damage and your 8 armor piercing, but it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do with a 970 bullet speed and 825 fire rate per minute. The reason it's not an S tier is because the shots per minute, due to the latency and the way the game mechanics work, by the time you actually unload a whole clip on someone, of course they're dead, but you've just burned through all that ammo. And so for that, also being a rare pick for a gun, only finding it in 1 or 2 spots, it keeps it out of the S class. Still has a 2.67 reload speed, and the recoil is pretty moderate. I'd say it could probably drop down to 2, even though the website it says rates it on at 3. So that'll be your A class. After that, right behind that, it's no surprise, is your SCAR-L. And it seems a little bit biased here because I'm doing the fully automatics, but it's because they are doing the best for their class and spot, especially when you're able to reach to medium, even long range targets with a scope, and still be able to hold your own up close against, say, a submachine gun or anything else. You're going to have some priority here. It's not just me being biased. Objectively speaking, going back to the SCAR, it has its 625 fire rate and it still does this 8-8 split, but you're still having a 2.3 reload speed, which I can't tell you how is crucial enough, especially in close range engagements. So where it loses everything else in your fire rate, it still makes up for it in your reload speed, and being able to almost outpush anybody else up close with that. After your SCAR-L, you have your M1 Grand. M1 Grand. Here we go for M1 Grand. Alright, M1 Grand. You have your 15 damage and your 10 armor piercing with 0 stopping power, but you have a bullet speed of 854, which means leading those targets is going to be less stressful. You're gonna be able to hit the targets more efficiently, more accurately, because you have this bullet speed to match. The fire rate per minute's a little lower, but with a semi-automatic, you're not looking for too much fire here, because more fire equates to more recoil. Reload speed still on par with 2.4, making it one of the best in the class. And so for this is definitely your A tier gun that I would put in there. Moving on, right behind the M1 Grand, we have the AVS 36. Now, AVS 36 compared to something like the M1 Grand, it's still about the same. You have your 15 damage and your 10 armor piercing with 0 stopping power. The bullet speed's at 815, so it's still up there enough to hit those medium range targets. But what really puts it in there is that it's still holding your 800 fire rate, which is insane. Being able to semi-auto burst someone up close and still reach them down range is a huge factor in this game. Also sporting a 2.3 reload speed, it really keeps it on par and keeps it in the A class. I would like to see the recoil come down just a tad, or maybe the bullet speed buffed just a little bit to put it in the S class, but for now it's definitely a solid pick for the A class over some of the other rifles. Moving on, your last gun in the A class tier is going to be your Springfield rifle. This is your first single fire rifle. And the reason this is above the S, well, let's look at the statistics. Now, sporting a 15 and 10, you got a 15 damage and 10 armor piercing, looks pretty spot on with some of the others. Where it really picks up is your 854 bullet speed. Now, your 48 shots per minute is on par with the car. It's a little lackluster versus the Enfield. Now, so you have to bring the Springfield up against the car, and they're pretty much the same all the way up until your bullet speed. Now, this is where it's really going to pay off to use the Springfield, because you're going to be able to hit your shots more accurately, especially on moving targets. And so for this, it's going to be the best one in your category for your A. Moving on, your next one, you have your B category. If I'm not mistaken, I've had to make this like 3 times. Okay, you have your FG42. The reason we picked the FG42 is because it is a monster. It doesn't just have the 15-10 slot, which can be absolutely devastating, but you also have a 750-750 split, and you have a 2.6 reload speed, which makes it pretty good for medium range engagements, but you can still pop off with a little scope and hit people from medium to far range. So for that, that's definitely going to be your first one in your B tier. Your next one is going to be your Gewehr 41, not to be confused with your Gewehr 43. I can show you the differences out here, and if you've ever used them, you'll definitely know if you picked the right one or not. Your Gewehr 41 is pretty on par with the Gewehr 43. The only major difference is the recoil, and I'm telling you, there's a ton of recoil. For that, the Gewehr 43 by itself is already going to be knocked down to your C category. Now, the reason the Gewehr 41 does hold its own is because it does only have a 3.3 reload speed, still has your 750 bullet speed, and 420 shots per minute is really pretty average for this class. Moving on behind that, you have your M1 carbine. Now, your M1 carbine is pretty special in this, as it's one of the only ones that only have 11 damage, in fact the only one that has 11 damage over the regular 15, 8, or 10. Now, where it really shines though is because it does have your 2.3 reload speed. It doesn't have the bullet speed as something of the Gewehr and everything else, but being able to really shine with the 2.3 reload speed and the minimalistic recoil, you can still pop off really close engagements and even sometimes outmatch some of those submachine guns in the class. And for this, I'm definitely going to put this in your B class. Moving on, after your B class, you have the SVT-40. Despite being this a somewhat rare gun that I don't see too much, it still holds its own. It has 15 dead and split with an 815 bullet speed, so it's definitely doing what it needs to in its category. I'm not expecting to run up into a building with it, but for medium range, I can still do what I want to and really touch people out from medium to far range. It does sport a 3.2 recoil, which isn't terrible, but pretty good for a semi-auto class if you're not talking about up-close engagements. And the recoil does say it's maxed out, but I'm going to be honest, I think they could probably take one off of there. I've used it a couple times, and just trying to be as objective as possible, I don't think it has as much as the game's letting on, but I digress. Moving on, your next one's going to be your Mosinia, your Mosinat, or however you'd like to represent it. This is one of the only ones that have that kind of graphic to it. But the Mosinia, going against something like the Springfield, you have to look at it verbatim. Is it better than the Springfield to put it in the category? Well, you have your 15-10 split, and that's pretty much the same. Where it's dropping off is your bullet speed. It's definitely holding off better than something like the car, but it's still just not as good as the 850. Reload speed's pretty much identical, and everything else is pretty much identical all the way through. It's not a bad rifle by any means, but if there's better options available, you have to go with the better options. Moving on after that, we have the Enfield. Now this one was, I had to go back a couple times back and forth to justify it to myself where the Enfield was placed. I've had it in D category, I've had it in C, but I think it should be your last one in your B category for this reason only. It still has your bullet speed. Because it's a single fire rifle, yes, the 4.4 reload speed, which is the worst in this category, is a lot, and you can definitely notice it if you're using it over some of the others. But where it really picks up is that it still has this 850 bullet speed and your 60 fire rates per minute, so you can really pop off if you need to from medium range. It's not the best rifle, but if it's all you got, go for it. Moving on after that, we've already put our Euro 43 in the C class. We next have the Johnson rifle. Going over to our Johnson rifle, which I have to say I do like, but looking at the statistics, I see why it's just not the best class. You have your 854 bullet speed, and you have your 15-10 split, but with a reload speed of 4.3 for a semi-auto, it just gets beat out by some of the other classes. Now I understand people are going to be a little bit angry with this versus some of the other ones, like maybe the Enfield, but with a 4.3, it's just not doing what it's supposed to be. It's not the semi kind of auto where you're really taking your shots with this amount of recoil and reload speed. You really kind of be rushed to take this, and I found myself most of the time using this in medium range combat, not really far out reaching with a scope, but using it more of like say an M1 Garand. And versus the M1 Garand in its class, it's almost identical, but it's almost double the reload speed, and for this, it just can't hold up to its potential that it needs. Now the big controversial item is the car in this, based off of its category. Now with your car versus something like the others, why did it get beat out by the Enfield? Well, the Enfield sports your 854 bullet speed. So versus your 750 bullet speed for the car, and I've noticed it too, it's just not as fast, it's just not as accurate as you want it to be. In fact, many times I found I'm killing myself because I'm shooting at a target who's shooting at me and we down each other. So you're getting a lot of trades with this gun, and again, it's not as objective as it should be. It's just a little side note, but against something like the Springfield, we can walk it down. 15-10 split, 850 over a 750, 100 more bullet speed, which does a factor in this game. It really does about lead time. Shots per minute are the same, and your reload speed's the same. I went back and forth between putting the car in B class and this in C several times, but the biggest factor I could find was your bullet speed. The reload speed is less, but when you're talking about single fire, you want to talk about your car actually reaching its target, right? You don't want to have to worry about leading too much. You don't want to worry about bullet drop. If you want to sit back and camp in a field and really reach people out from there, you just can't do as effectively with the car as you can with the Enfield or the Springfield. And for this is going to be the last gun for the C tier. Alright, so thank you guys for watching. If you have any different opinions on it, don't be afraid to reach out to me or comment on the video, like, and subscribe. Side note, as we were working on this, we realized we didn't do a thing for the Strayer AUG, and so we went back and looked at it, and we believe the Strayer AUG is in the B class. The reason we felt that way for the B class is because it's 8-8 split. Your 970 bullet speed is nice for something like the M4, but at 650 shots per minute and a 2.5, it still gets beat out by some of the other ones in the class. And so for this, it's just not as good as some of the other rifles. So that's a good side note. Sorry guys for that. Try to be a bit more professional in the next video. As always guys, stay fierce.